Hello, everyone. My name is Chris with National Parents Organization, and today I'm here with Dr. Warren Farrell, and he is an author of 7 books, and most notably on the boy crisis and on father and child reunion. And he's here today to talk with us a bit about men's issues and shared parenting and all of those type things. So, Dr. Farrell, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. I have a lot of respect for NPO and the work that has been done over the years, especially in the area of parental alienation and exposing the crime that is.
And you have a long history with the National Parents Organization, being on the board previously. Is that correct?
Yes, and maybe a 50 to 100-year history, something like that.
Well, you've certainly been around these issues for a long time, and I wanted to start off today by just starting off and getting your take on shared parenting. And I know you've been around this for a long time, so it'd be interesting, I think, to see your perspective on how far things have come and where we still need to make some progress.
Yes, as many of your people listening know, in the 1800s and so on, there was assumed that when there was a divorce, that the father would be the one to be involved with the child primarily, and but more recently, especially since the feminist movement started having an impact about 50 years ago or so, increasingly there's been an assumption. Well, increasingly for a while, and then as a result of the work of NPO and other organizations like it, it's gone back a little bit toward a greater balance. But the bias has certainly been in the last half century, that women have the right to children and men have to fight for children. Now, this doesn't mean that the average judge, if you asked him or her out of session, does he or she think that the children do best with both parents? The average judge would say, yes, the child does best with both parents. I think that's probably true. But when a mother says that the father might be dangerous, prone toward violence, be calling her names and calling names, or getting angry, or she just felt threatened, something like that, and then the judge is in a difficult position, which is, the judge may actually see that, yes, listen, everybody in a relationship over a long period of time loses their temper, calls the other one names. But if this is the 1 in 100 cases where the father might be, out of control, or what the mother is saying is not just her perception, but quite a reality, then it's all I'd have to do is make a mistake once, and I could be lose my position as a judge. And so that's because we have an instinct in the world, in biology, to protect women. And when somebody is involved in not protecting women, particularly if the judge is a male judge, then he and or she, but especially he, can be very vulnerable as a judge. And so the judge has to sort of bend over backwards to pay attention to any fears that the mother may have, even if it's a fear that has no actuality, actual manifestation, or is very credibly answered by a father. And so that's what makes parental alienation such a challenging experience, because most judges do understand that if there's evidence of the mother speaking negatively about the father, that's not a good thing. But few judges know how bad a thing it is, which means that when the child is looking in the mirror, and he, especially a boy, and he hears that his father is a narcissist and is maybe self-centered, just cares about himself, is somebody who's unreliable, is irresponsible, is a liar, this type of thing. The child is looking in the mirror, and again, especially the boy child, and the boy child is seeing the body language of the father, is seeing the nose of the father, the eyes of the father, and is fearing that, well, maybe I am a narcissist. Well, after all, I am looking in the mirror. Maybe I am a liar. I do remember when I did lie. Maybe I am inherently irresponsible, like my dad is. but he can't say anything to his dad about it. Mom said that you're a liar and you're irresponsible and you're a narcissist. Dad, talk to me about that, because he's afraid that the dad will get angry. That will then create an argument between mom and dad, and then that will further destabilize the already destabilized relationship, and he'll lose his security. And besides, dad will get angry at him, mom will get angry at him for telling, talking to dad about this. Conversely, if he talks to mom about this, then mom is feeling like, wait a minute, whose side are you on? Your dad's side or mine? And his primary relationship is with his mother, if as in most cases after divorce, and so he's afraid to jeopardize his primary relationship. It's like arguing to your employer about, are you really are you really in fact telling the truth about that? Is this the right perception? Well, this is not a great way to get on your employer's best side. And so he's caught between a rock and a hard place. And the daughter is also caught between a rock and a hard place, because she does not want to see men that way. And if she does begin to see men that way, she begins to lose trust in males that she's dating. If she loses trust in males that she's dating, she begins to be fearful of how she can get proper male attention. And she tends to do one of two things. She tends to either be sexual before she's comfortable, because she knows that's the one way she can get male's attention, and beat out the other women by being sexual, maybe before she's ready. And that's not good for her. Conversely, she thinks that she begins to not trust men, because she can't trust her father. And so she's afraid of being intimate to begin with. So I think that parental alienation is one of the most damaging forms of child abuse, that has been way under recognized and undervalued. And unfortunately, the new movie that has come out, the documentary, the series on Woody Allen, and suggesting that he was an abuser of the children. That movie was very much tied in with a suspicion of parental alienation by feminist groups, which was a very huge mistake of integrity for the Woody Allen movie to tie that into to denigrating the validity of parental alienation. Parental alienation is very real. I've been working with both fathers and mothers for a half century, and it is very common for the father and the mother to both feel negatively about the other partner. But we know, though, from the work of Glynis Walker. Glynis Walker is a female researcher who did work, who discovered some of the depth of parental alienation by interviewing children on the average of 5 years after divorce, and asking the children, does your dad ever speak negatively about your mom so that you can hear it? Does your mom speak negatively about your dad? Do they both speak negatively about each other? Does neither speak negatively about each other? Only 10% said that they hadn't heard either speak negatively about each other. But among the ones that said that one had spoken negatively about the other and not the vice versa, it was a 4.5 to 1 ratio of the children saying that only their moms spoke negatively about their dads. Their dads did not speak negatively about their moms. Unfortunately, in 11% of the cases, both sexes spoke negatively about each other, but the great majority of the cases, it was the moms that spoke negatively about the dads. Now, if the children are talking to researchers 10 years later, and about 80% of them say that that one parent spoke negatively about the other, and that it was a 4.5 to 1 ratio, moms to dads versus dads to moms, then professionals going around saying that there is no such thing as parental alienation are being political, and being political with our children's future lives is really a form of abuse in itself.
Yeah, I mean it's a real issue, and now we have scales to be able to measure the severity of that, and I mean it ranges all the way from a one-time offhanded casual comment to a pattern, right? And it's as I think it when it becomes a pattern, we've seen that that's where it's most damaging. But certainly to not acknowledge it at all is a huge crime in itself. And I think people in our that have been against shared parenting have tried to pass that false narrative on. And we're just going to have to continue to educate judges and lawyers and the public about this thing. And yes, it is real, and yes, it has real consequences. And have you seen any movement recently in any way that we've made a positive impact in the education side?
I think so. I have, noticed that there's a little bit more openness on the part of judges to at least understand that equally shared parenting is the preferred way to go. I think we've made movement on that. I think the Woody Allen movie has had a negative impact on sort of making us suspicious that parental alienation is anything more than just a father's a father's rights method of putting down mother. That is not accurate. It doesn't mean that anything can be misused by either gender, and both genders do misuse things that give them advantage, and that there's no one that is pure from that as a gender. But this is certainly a very damaging phenomenon, and the lack of understanding of all of the different ways that equal shared parenting is so important is also very crucial. So, for example, when I did the research for the Boy Crisis book, I began to, I looked through just thousands of studies and ended up coming up with actually more than 70, but 50 plus studies that were very reliably connected to the lack of father involvement, leading to the children doing much worse, but particularly the boy children doing much worse. And so, and there was such a need for people to understand this that I ended up creating an appendix in the Boy Crisis book that was just listed more than 50 ways in which children who have dad deprivation do considerably worse, both girl children and boy children. But the damage is more intensely with boy children, because at least the girl child has a female role model that can help, and girls are much more likely to express their fears and express their feelings. And so a mother can see the tears and the tone of voice that suggests that the girl is distressed, whereas boys are much more likely trained and socialized to keep their feelings and fears to themselves, and they don't have a male role model who can sense, this is what I went through when I was his age. This is what this is about, and feel comfortable being able to talk to dad about it, and have it handled in dad style ways. But some of the things that just really were very interesting was seeing that children who grew up in wealthy communities that did not have their dads involved did a little bit worse on math, science, and some other subjects than children who grew up in poor communities who did have dad involvement. So oftentimes we say, well, dad involvement or lack thereof, and the benefits of dad involvement are just because dads are more likely to be involved in wealthier communities. It's a socioeconomic thing. Well, it turns out that when I did the research on that for the Boy Crisis, it turned out that it was not just a socioeconomic thing, and I began to see that suicide was connected more to lack of father involvement than any other single thing. I sort of began to see that there were the way we measured depression for girls was very well studied, and the way we measured the indicators of suicide for girls was very well studied. And so I started contacting all of the agencies and foundations that did studies on suicide. And even though suicide is about 4 to 5 times more likely to be boys committing it than girls, every single person I interviewed whose foundation was responsible for doing work on suicide said they could get not a single penny to study suicide among males, and usually not even to include males in their studies. And so here's something that affects boys 4 to 5 times as much as it does girls. and we don't have money to study it, which gives you a sense of a deeper problem. And the deeper problem is how biologically programmed we are to care about protecting women, but how biologically programmed we are to feel that men are disposable, and if men have a complaint, they're whining, and whining feels to women in particular and other men, it feels really, women don't fall in love with whining men. They fall in love with alpha men. And so when a man complains, he's seen by many women as whining. And when he's seen as whining, it's for many women like a whining man is like nails scratching on a chalkboard. It just doesn't feel right. And this is part of our biology, in every part of animal species. Women reproduced with the alpha male whenever they could, and we men, we did everything we could to be that alpha male, even though we were unbecoming human beings and just becoming human doings in the process. And so all of that is uninvestigated, and is deeply behind why men are not, dads are not so understood. But when we look more carefully, we realize that dad involvement is the solution, or a primary solution, to almost every single mental health problem, every single physical health problem like obesity, every single academic subject boys are falling behind in. And it's mostly, when I looked at why were boys falling behind girls in almost every academic subject, and especially in reading and writing, I found that it wasn't true for all boys, but it was true for that segment of boys that had a lack of father involvement. And so I started looking at that more, deeply, and saw that in all 53 of the largest developed nations, boys were falling behind girls in almost every academic subject, or in all academic subjects, depending on the nation. And so when I looked more carefully at that, it wasn't true that all boys had that falling behind problem, but it was very disproportionately among dad deprived boys. And so I started looking at, well, why is that? And I started seeing that the father and the mother, that the mother tends to be very good on average, and there's exceptions to this rule, and reversal of roles is maybe true in 10% of the cases. And so the mothers are usually very good at protecting children and very good at nurturing children's talents. And so if a boy is good at singing, or the daughter is good at singing, they'll say, "Sweetie, you could be a wonderful singer, or a wonderful musician, or a wonderful, maybe has a tall son, you could be a great basketball player. You should hone your skills on that." And the boy will say, "Okay," and feel very excited. But usually he will end up not being able to focus on the discipline that is needed to hone those skills. The dad is more likely to say, "Okay, you want to be a gymnast? To be a gymnast, sweetie, to the daughter, or son, to be a gymnast, or a great basketball player, it's not just all fun. It doesn't come naturally. You've got to practice your drills over and over again. You've got to give up texting as much. You've got to give up playing video games. You've got to give up seeing people you want. A lot of your childhood is going to be lost if you want, in one way, if you want to be so good at something that so many people want to be good at." And the son will go, "Okay, okay," but then the dad is far more likely to enforce that. "Son, if you want to do that way, then I'm gonna, you're gonna have to give up those video games. And if you don't give them up, just tell me you don't want to be that NBA player, and we'll work on something different." But there's much more boundary enforcement from that dads tend to do, and the boundary enforcement requires the child to do something that it doesn't want to do at the moment, but is good for its long-term goals, and that's postponed gratification. And we find that the biggest predictor of success or failure is postponed gratification. And so when the child has that, usually from the dad, and has that nurturing from the mom, and the father and mother are communicating effectively with each other, they can produce for the child checks and balance parenting. And it's the checks and balance parenting where the mother says, no, you're too young to climb the tree. And the dad says, you can climb the tree. And the mother says, wait a minute, we have a different message we're giving to our son here or daughter here. And they work it out in front of the child and say, okay, that you can climb the tree, but not too high and not on these branches. And you have to be out there, Dad, under the tree in case the child falls. You can cushion the fall. And so, to make sure you're paying attention, let me take the cell phone from you. And they work out a deal that gives the child the best options of climbing the tree, all the advantages, which includes, by the way, an increase in IQ from climbing trees. I'll be happy to talk to you more about that, but just so many things I discovered in doing the research for the boy crisis that so many of the things that dads do, like roughhousing, like teasing, like encouraging the children to take risks, like dropping them off at the playground and not being with them at the playground. All of these things have enormous advantages for the children. But one of the reasons why we don't have equal shared parenting is that there's not that mothers don't know all of the reasons why, for example, roughhousing is likely to lead to the children being more empathetic. And I'm not blaming mothers on this because mothers can't hear what dads don't say. And I've never heard a dad say, sweetie, I want to roughhouse with the kids. It'll really help them be more empathetic. And if the dad did say that, he better have his data available
Right.
because,
Yeah.
because the counterintuitiveness of roughhousing and empathy is pretty counterintuitive. And I didn't know that until I did the research on that for the boy crisis either.
Yeah, I mean, certainly parenting is a it's a balance, right? And if you take one of the influences out of that balance, then the kids just won't get that other side, and that's so important. Um, so I want to bring up here. I've got your website up here, and we've got your author. You've got 7 books out. Of course, the Boy Crisis is one that we most talk about. I think in the shared parenting realms, but I want to talk a little bit about the Boy Crisis and just what was the genesis of it, and what sort of I know it's had great impact, so I'd like to hear you talk a little bit about that, about some of the impact that it's made. But I think it's a fantastic book. It's a great read, and if you're one of our viewers out there and you haven't read the book, please get a copy of it, listen to it. Read it, that kind of thing. But yeah, tell us a little bit more about the impact of the book and how it came about.
Well, when I was some of your listeners know that my background is that I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, and spoke all around the world on behalf of women's issues. And a few times here and there, as I was speaking, like in Japan, it happened the first time, and a Japanese teacher, female, came up to me afterwards and said, Dr. Farrell, I really appreciate all the things you're saying about women and the struggles they're having and your enormous empathy for women. But actually, in my classroom, the boys are having more problems than the girls. Well, I began to hear this in Australia, in Canada, in the UK, in Germany. And I started sort of increasingly paying attention, even though I was making my living from being empathetic to women. It was like, maybe there's something else here besides empathy for women alone, and realizing that, that boys were having struggles as well. And the more I looked into it, the more I saw that this wasn't only just not only true, but it was true way beyond what I had ever expected. So, for example, boys' IQs were falling. Boys' sperm counts at the time were dropping about 40%. By the time the Boy Crisis book was written, had dropped 50%, and now they're down to 60% drop in sperm count, which, of course, like everything, and that's a good metaphor. Sperm count, of course, impacts fertility. Fertility doesn't just impact men, it impacts the future generations and women and women's desire to have children and couples' desires to have children. And so, like everything that affects boys, we in the feminist movement often looked at things only from the feminist point of view and from the female point of view, and we completely missed the fact that that we're all in the same family boat. And when only one sex wins, both sexes lose. Women don't want boys who are losers. They don't hunt for future fathers in unemployment lines, or boys, males today who are between the ages of 28 and 31 are 66% more likely to live with their parents at home. And girls don't go from unemployment lines, and then when they meet a guy at a party, even if he's good looking, and he says, I want to take you home. Oh, why don't we go back to my place? And my place is his parents' basement. This does not inspire sexual feelings on the part of most young women. And the reason it doesn't inspire sexual feelings, among other obvious reasons, is women sense on some deep level that they want a strong, independent, successful, purposeful, highly motivated males to be the father for their children. And so they select for those. And so when boys lose, girls lose. And when men lose, women lose. And I started to see that the feminist movement was really good at articulating the hashtag Me Too for women, but realized that a hashtag Me Too monologue is not a good thing. What is a good thing is a hashtag Me Too dialogue, where in addition to women expressing their feelings, which has been more viable for all of history, we also encourage men to express their feelings and fears, which has been the opposite of viable throughout all of history. And so if either sex needs to express their fears and feelings more, that's part of what, feminists often complain about male toxicity. Well, male toxicity is disconnecting from your feelings and fears, or it includes that. And we are not encouraging, no feminist that I know of is saying, well, we also have to hear the male side of these things. And so therefore there should be a hashtag Me Too dialogue, not a hashtag Me Too monologue. And HR, human resources, should not be called HR the way it's been operating. It should really be called HER, because it's only women for the most part that report to human resources. So it really should be HER. And so all of these problems that men have that include male toxicity are being further magnified by our lack of encouragement of men to open up and say, I know that that the woman at work felt this way when this happened, but it's also, let's look at, before we fire the man for offending the woman, let's talk to the man and the woman together. Let's talk to them separately. Let's have them communicate with each other. Let's see where the misunderstandings are. And so let's not make bosses fearful of mentoring women because of the fact that if they do, they're going to enter into a minefield of, of offending her or not promoting her quickly enough or whatever. And that works against women. It works against respecting women. It works against hiring women, and it works against firing women, which is not a good thing. If you're afraid to fire, you'll be afraid to hire.
Yeah, I think there's so much to unpack there. But you did mention the feminist movement a couple of times, and I want to talk just a little bit more in depth about that. And as what I've observed, at least for the feminist movement, is you really have two fractions right now. You have the sort of moderate fraction, which is men and women should be equal, and then you have this extremist faction where it's the women want superiority over men, right? And I think that fraction has also inspired another movement called Men Going Their Own Way, MGTOW, which I think is in the wrong direction to go in, right? Where men just decide, well, I'm just not going to deal with women. I'm going to be single and just not deal with them at all. Certainly that's not helpful either, long term for us as a society. But what's your thoughts on that, and what have you observed, and what can we do to sort of bring this back to center? I think.
Yes, for many men, particularly the people who join Men Going Their Own Way, MGTOW, or incels, incels aren't voluntarily celibate, they're involuntarily celibate. And men going their own way don't wish to go their own way. They just feel that the system is so structured against them that when they put their penis in a woman's body, they're putting their life in her hands. And that's not worth, and they don't want to put their life in their hands for an hour's worth of sexual satisfaction. And so they just say, I don't know a way around this. Now, this is not healthy for those men, and it's not healthy for anybody. And it doesn't mean that it's unhealthy. There are some people that are, programmed to want to be by themselves. That's fine. But to be doing that to because the society, you fear and feel that the society is so structured against you that you can't that you don't, that you're not being listened to, that you don't get due process. That is really very dangerous, and we see this in universities in particular, where there's things like microaggressions in campus and cancel culture that are making it very fearful, men very fearful of participating in psychology or the humanities, because in the social sciences, they're surrounded with women who feel that if they feel offended, that they should be able to say so, and they should start out by being believed. And if there's a man that touches them on a date before they feel they're ready, and they're not really that engaged with the man in the long term, or that they can accuse him of sexual harassment. And the policy is that the woman is to be believed. And if the woman is to be believed, that justifies their being in college and universities a lack of due process. And there is, I talk in the Boy Crisis book about how damaging the lack of due process is for our sons in universities, who are, if they're accused of something, because the woman is to be believed, and the man, it's justified that the man should not be able to cross-examine the woman, because we don't want to jeopardize the woman's studies any more than they're already jeopardized by her being upset by whatever offended her. And so her offense is treated with this enormous honor, and his feelings of the hurts and pains of being potentially falsely accused or being misinterpreted about the accusation is so great. So what we've done in universities is, first of all, we've taken away the very essence of what a university is, which is, university should be a place where anything can be said. I'm going to repeat that: where anything can be said. And our job in the university is to question what is being said, and to be curious about what is being said, to facilitate what is being said that we most disagree with, and allow that to be in our heads in addition to the opposite of what was being said. And to be able to ultimately not only have the different sides represented in a debate, but to have those different sides available to us in our own psyche to such a degree that we can draw on all sides of an argument. That's what a university should prepare a boy and a girl for. And that's the way we'll have the best nation, the best world possible. Not if you said the wrong thing at the wrong time, in the wrong way, in the wrong tone of voice, that you should have at least given me a trigger warning before you said it. That is the exact opposite of what a university should be. And that's the exact opposite of what will create true love, true compassion between men and women. As you probably know, Chris, I've done for the past 30 years couples communication workshops. And one of the things that is really apparent to me is that everyone has a different way of looking at it, the exact same problem. And that different way, when I, in the couples communication workshop, I hear the woman or the man, doesn't make any difference who starts, frame something that was their experience in such a way, which almost always involves, if it's a woman, the man doing something wrong and her feeling offended. If it's a man, it usually involves the woman doing something wrong and him feeling upset or offended, but he's more likely to keep it to himself. But when he does have a chance to have a safe environment to air it, he has those things about equally to the woman. But when they both see each other's perspectives, and rather than listening while forming their own responses in their mind, I can have them alter their biologically natural state of being defensive and hear each other's perspectives first, which is a complex process, because it is in tension with our biological propensity to become defensive when we hear personal criticism. But when we train couples to do that, they are able to see that that each person had the best intent most of the time, and the best intent was not being seen by the person that felt offended. And the love, I think I can honestly say that people who follow the method that I present in the couples communication workshops, and 6 months, a year later, if they follow that method, and many do, most do, but not all, they end up feeling more deeply in love, and oftentimes like they love each other as much as when they first met. And that is just very gratifying to me. But it's also a metaphor of what we need to be doing with every man and every woman needs to be doing with each other. And the difference, by the way, is not any different with gay couples. The gay couples that attend my workshops, they have the same misunderstandings about each other. And parents and children that attend as a couple is any two people that have a past that would like to have a future with better communication. The parent and the child sees the world from two different perspectives, but when the parent and child can fully relax and listen to the other person's vision without having their own vision go through their mind as their partner is talking, the end result is much more love and compassion for each other. And for children listening to their parents, much greater wisdom at a much earlier age.
Well, yeah, that's a fantastic point, and I think a lot of us forget that to communicate effectively when there is conflict, you have to be vulnerable, right? And and as humans, it's hard for us to be vulnerable, and so that makes communicating when you have an issue especially hard. Over just your normal everyday life, and so I think that's a great point to bring up, and people should just remember that it's okay to be vulnerable, and having the right environment to be vulnerable in is certainly important if you're going to communicate with your partner.
Absolutely. And also in that line, very few people realize that anger is vulnerability's mask. And when we see somebody who's angry, if we, and particularly if they're angry at us, if as we're feeling that anger and fearing that anger, if we can just use the word in our mind, wait a minute, this anger is coming from her or his vulnerability. And when you see it through the lens of potential vulnerability, your eyes soften, your body language becomes more relaxed, and you're much more likely to say to your partner, my God, that must have been really painful to you. Or that must have, if you and I were brothers and you say, you're the older brother, Warren, and I'm the younger brother. And, dad was always favoring you and he really didn't pay that much attention to me. And I say, my goodness, you were the little sweetheart of the family. You got away with doing things at a much younger age than I did. What do you mean? And I'm only thinking about all your advantages and you're only thinking about my advantages. And then if I'm interrupting you, and and then when you say something, I both interrupt you and I distort you, and you get angrier and angrier at me. And if I can just say, wait a minute, this is Chris feeling vulnerable that he wasn't loved by dad, vulnerable that he didn't get the same attention, feeling vulnerable that, that I was always the role model in the family and so on. And if I feel that vulnerability and I soften to you and I just say, Chris, tell me more about that. Oh my God, that must made you feel so isolated, so lonely, so much like, Big Warren was always the center of attention. And then you're very unlikely to hit me or push me or shove me aside when I'm ask you to tell me more about how you're feeling, and my eyes and my body language is seeing your vulnerability. Whereas if I responded with anger and then interrupting and distorting everything you said, the chances of us getting into a physical fight are fairly much increased. And if when I train people with domestic violence issues, the first thing to do is to look at anger as vulnerability's mask and how to listen to a person who is angry in such a way as to reduce the anger as opposed to increasing the anger. And so I've been interviewed by NPR and places like that, and they say, how can you even be associated with people like the men's rights movement? They're filled with haters. And I say, the best thing to do to undo a hater is to listen to them, to feel for them, to ask them where they're vulnerable. And you who call yourself a progressive should be the most likely to be willing to be progressive by hearing people who are in pain, rather than just calling them haters and then walking the other way and turning your back on them. That will not reduce their hatred.
Yeah, that'll certainly just fuel it. And well, we're kind of running out of time here. I'd love to talk for several more hours, but we've covered a lot of topics. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about?
I think maybe if we glanced over a few things in the boy crisis, but if you were to read the boy crisis, I'd say, but you, like many people, have a limited amount of time. I'd suggest a couple of things. One is to focus on the differences between dad style parenting and mom style parenting. So you can explain compassionately to a mom what you contribute. Dads tend to contribute a lot of things without understanding that what the value of them is. And second, study the sections on family dinner nights and how to make sure that a family dinner night does not become a family dinner nightmare. Because if you know how to communicate with every member of your family by hearing them well, your family will become what I call e pluribus unum. The family will be take one powerful experience helps each member of the family feel heard. And so each one feels like a unique self. Therefore, many are in the family, but the family unit is bringing out a possibility of each family member being unified by the support it receives from each other. Also look at the material on why dads are so important at every age, including births, prenatal births, from prenatal births until adulthood. Even if your child has been raised without father involvement, what can be done after that? And I guess the final thing I'd say is that I'm getting as much positive response to the Audible version of the book that in the last 5 chapters on ADHD, John Gray, the fellow who wrote Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus, we both read our sections of the book that we wrote. And so there's really a very, so don't shy away from the Audible version as well. It doesn't have all the footnotes in it, but many people find it much easier to take a car trip and listen to the book than it is to read every page of it.
Yeah, I consume a lot of the books that I read read are on Audible, and it's absolutely fantastic to be able to get through that material without having to physically stop and hold the book in your hand and turn the page. But yeah, that's a great point. So let's see. So Dr. Farrell, tell us how can people get a hold of you? You're on the web. You've got a web page, and you're on social media, I presume.
I do. Probably the best way to get a hold of me is just look at my website, warrenfarrell.com. And the Farrell is not F-E-R, but F-A-R-R-E-L-L. F-E-R is Will Ferrell, and he's a little funnier than I am. And so, Amazon is the least expensive way to get the book, but if you have a bit more money, support your local bookstore. But right now, Amazon's having a sale on the Boy Crisis book, so that's probably the least expensive way to get a hold of it.
Well, fantastic. And are there any books in the pipe that you're working on?
There are, as you probably know, I wrote a book called The Myth of Male Power, and I'm probably going to update that book to be called The Paradox of Male Power, looking at both the male experience of powerlessness and the female experience of powerlessness. And I put the couples communication course on Zoom. And so I will be looking at that. I'll be able to distribute that and distribute that. I want to create a foundation to distribute that to poor communities as well. So every couple in a poor community that's having challenges will have a free copy of that course that'll be called Role Mate to Soulmate. And if you're interested in that, just email me. My email is on the address is on the website at warren@warrenfarrell.com. and I'll let you know more about the details on the role mate to soulmate couples course.
Well, Dr. Farrell, thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing what you come up with here in the future. And we'll certainly keep in touch as things change in this movement.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.